99% of people order the wrong steak. Most people just look at the menu and pick something like ribeye, filet, New York strip. But here's the thing. Those names don't actually tell you how the steak will taste. Because the real secret behind steak flavor is how hard that muscle worked during the cow's life. Some muscles barely moved at all. Others worked constantly just to keep the animal standing or breathing. And that single detail determines whether your steak will be buttery tender or packed with flavor. So today, we're breaking down every major steak cut. And once you understand this, you'll never order steak the same way again. Filet mignon. Filet mignon sits deep inside the cow's lower back, and biologically speaking, this muscle does almost nothing. It doesn't help the animal stand, it doesn't help it walk, it doesn't carry weight, it simply exists. Because of that inactivity, the muscle never develops thick connective tissue. The fibers remain incredibly fine and delicate. That's why filet mignon is famous for its buttery softness. But there is a trade-off. Since the muscle doesn't move much, it also doesn't receive heavy blood flow. And less blood flow means less intense flavor. Filet is the quiet aristocrat of steaks. Elegant, refined, but never wild. Now, move slightly forward to the rib section. Here we find the ribeye. This muscle is partially protected by the rib cage and doesn't experience much mechanical stress. But something interesting happens here. Instead of becoming lean, this area becomes a fat storage zone. Those beautiful white streaks you see inside ribeye, that's called marbling. Tiny rivers of fat running through the meat. When ribeye cooks, that fat melts slowly, and the center eye of fat begins to baste the meat from the inside, almost like a built-in self-watering system. That's why ribeye is often described as the most flavorful classic steak. Not because the muscle works hard, but because it stores energy. Further back along the spine is the New York strip. This muscle is slightly more involved in movement than ribeye. It helps stabilize the animal's posture, so the fibers become a little firmer. You'll notice something else here. Unlike ribeye, which relies on internal marbling, the New York strip carries a thick fat cap along one edge. That fat cap melts during cooking and releases a deep, beefy aroma. So instead of soft richness like ribeye, the strip offers structure and bite, a balance between tenderness and strength. Now we arrive at one of the most fascinating steaks in the world, the T-bone. But here's the secret. T-bone is not actually a single cut. It's a biomechanical cross-section of two muscles. On one side of the T-shaped bone sits the fillet, soft, delicate, quiet. On the other side sits the New York strip, firm, structured, and powerful. Two completely different muscles, joined by one bone. The porterhouse is simply the luxury version. Same structure, but with a much larger fillet portion. It's essentially the king-sized T-bone. Now we move away from the spine, toward the muscles that actually worked for a living. Hanger steak. Hanger steak is suspended near the diaphragm. It doesn't support body weight, but it does something equally important. It helps the cow breathe. That constant movement means extremely high blood circulation, which produces a very unique flavor, almost mineral-like, sometimes described as slightly iron-rich. That's why butchers traditionally kept hanger steak for themselves. It was known as the butcher's secret. Next come flank and skirt steak. These muscles sit along the belly. Their job? Support the abdominal wall and stabilize movement, which means they work constantly. As a result, their muscle fibers grow long, thick, and very visible. You can literally see the grain lines running across the meat. That texture makes them tougher, but also incredibly flavorful. And there's a trick to eating them properly. Always cut across the grain. That breaks the muscle fibers into shorter segments and instantly makes the meat more tender. Modern alchemy, rediscovered cuts. Not every steak became famous naturally. some were discovered by modern butchery science. Flat iron steak. Flat iron steak comes from the shoulder. For decades, this muscle was considered unusable. Right through the middle ran a thick strip of tough connective tissue. But once butchers learned how to carefully remove that seam, something surprising happened. The remaining meat turned out to be incredibly tender. In fact, flat iron is now considered the second most tender cut after filet, but with far stronger beef flavor. It's a perfect example of culinary science turning waste into treasure. Finally, we reach one of South America's most beloved cuts, picanha. This steak sits on top of the rump and carries a thick fat cap on top. In many countries, that fat layer gets trimmed away. But in Brazil, it's the entire point. Picanha is skewered and slowly roasted over fire. As it cooks, the fat melts and flows downward with gravity, coating the meat continuously, like a slow cascade of flavor, from anatomy to your plate. So the next time you pick up a steak knife, remember this: you're not just cutting into meat, you're cutting into a story. A record of how that animal lived with gravity. Muscles that barely moved became tender. Muscles that worked became flavorful. So when choosing your steak, you're really making a philosophical choice. Do you want stillness or do you want labor? Because in the world of steak, flavor is simply the taste of effort.